Hi, HR Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today, we have a special guest on the show, Michelle Ray, who's a leadership expert, keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and author who helps organizations create engaged workplaces, develop exceptional leaders, and implement practical strategies to revitalize their cultures. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you, Chris. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Congratulations on the new book. We can see it behind you on the shelf as well.
Yes.
So tell everyone about the new book and what inspired it.
Well, the new book is called Leading in Real Time, How to Drive Success in a Radically Changing World. When I was writing the book, which I started before the pandemic, actually, at the beginning of 2020, I think I was already starting to think about my own relevance in terms of how long I've been doing what I'm doing. And then also, some of my clients and leaders and CEOs, and thinking about how much the world has changed and how, we still need to be relevant to our workforce and our clients. And, as you go on in your profession, I think it's really important to keep evolving. Mm-hmm. And that's really what inspired me. It sort of was not just my own sort of experience and story, but just thinking about my clients and what's in front of everyone right now.
Yeah, as you just said, is very timely given current events. What do you mean by leading in real time?
Leading in real time is about understanding exactly what's right in front of you. It's about knowing how to take the best course of action in the moment and focusing on those things that you can control. So if you're focusing on what's right in front of you and understanding it, I think that's the key. One example is thinking about your new workforce, thinking about what they need, leading differently to how you led, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, because so much has changed. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by leading in real time. It's about leading in the moment and understanding what you need to do right now to have the best result.
Kind of goes back to an old book of what got you here won't get you there.
Exactly. Because we used to take such a long-term view of leadership. We'd look out on the horizon and think about our long-term strategy. But I think today leadership is definitely more present moment based. And that's what great leaders today are realizing. They've got to focus on the now.
What are some of the sort of traits, essential traits of a real-time leader?
Well, I think one of the first is not a surprise and probably something that many of your other guests have talked about is being real and being authentic and being transparent. All of those factor into great leadership because you can't pull the wool over the eyes of your workforce or your customers. So you've really got to be in tune with them and understand what's important to them. And those are some of the attributes that are going to make you successful in the now.
What do you think that stops people from being authentic? Is it like the balance of how much do I reveal of me? How much do I hold back? What's
exactly
typically you hear from clients?
Well, I really think that the number one issue for a lot of leaders is, trying to figure out how to do that very thing. And I think if they just simply think about leading this way and not leading this way.
Interesting.
That's the key. Understanding that to be transparent, this is how your workforce sees you. They want to be seen as an equal. They want parity. They want collaboration. They want to be able to relate to you. And they don't sort of put leaders on a pedestal the way that we think that some leaders think people still operate. That's not the case.
And just for everyone on the audio who may not have seen that, we're talking about, as opposed to leading from top down, it's about meeting people where they are on the same level.
Exactly.
As well.
Yes.
Yeah. Could you share some of the stories that kind of stood out to you during your research and that you share in the book?
Well, I mean, I did interview some of my own clients, and some of them realized that they had to change their own style of leading. One in particular is a 40-something year old, actually 30-something entrepreneur who's been incredibly successful with a restaurant chain, and I believe that the reason that he has been successful is because he totally relates to his team and they relate to him. And, they're able to buy into his vision because he gives them so much room to grow, and shares his vision and gets them completely involved in setting the goals for his business. And that was really inspiring to me to hear how, he knows that he has to lead the way they want to be led. And I think from him, what I realized and what I kept learning every time we connected is that leaders build leaders, not followers. And because he's been really successful at that, that's why he continues to grow and give them the opportunity to grow as well. That was one example.
From a practical perspective then, how do we go about, nurturing authentic connections? What are some of the things that we can do?
In a way, I think this environment that we're in right now with so much time that we're spending online, it makes us more human because, you're seeing the back of somebody's living room, somebody's, bedroom turned office. And I think when you're really letting people in that way, then there's an opportunity to create a deeper connection because they're seeing you in your own environment. So actually, I think that's been a really big advantage that we can get closer, we can get up close and personal with people. So if people in a leadership role can take advantage of that, I still think that the most important thing and has become even more important than ever is to make sure that you are connecting and making that a number one priority in your business, to stay in touch and stay connected with your team as much as possible, whatever level of leader you are.
Mm-hmm. Is that physically and virtually? Or do you recommend that to your leaders that there has to be some physical?
I think there've been a lot of examples, Chris, of companies that have been very successful who've only been operating virtually. Maybe before the pandemic, some of them were gathering, once a year and bringing their teams together. It just depends on the size of the organization. But they understood up front that their business model was going to be successful by getting the best talent from all over the world. So they could expand their horizons virtually, with remote work being, one of the best ways of doing that. So that traditional model, it's still possible if you can bring people in. But if you master the art of connecting this way and realize that you've got to be communicating with people and letting them know what's going on, then you can really be successful. It's just adjusting your own mindset around the new reality of remote work and what people are looking for in many cases.
Yeah. And that in itself requires a shift in leadership style.
Definitely, especially for those who aren't used to it. Some have embraced it totally and they're doing really well because they just get it, that they can connect in an instant and they can have people gathering, 5,000, 10,000 people online. It's just amazing what we can do now.
Mm-hmm. A big focus for our community, and you mentioned and you talk about in the book, is leading with purpose and weaving that into the DNA and the culture of the organization. And I think the way you put it is very nice. Why is meaning the new motivation for a changing workforce?
Exactly. Meaning is the new motivation. And if you think about, I've got another chapter as well called Voices Rising, chapter 9. And the reality is that there's no delineation anymore between what people are passionate about outside of work and what they care about in the workplace. So they bring their passion and their interests right into work. The myriad of social causes and issues that people are thinking about and are concerned about and are passionate about. So they want to be able to align that passion with what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's very exciting that people are inspired when they know that they're contributing and making a difference and what they're doing has meaning in the world.
Mm-hmm. What do you advise companies when you speak to them about making that a reality? Because that's a big shift for some organizations, or for many organizations.
It really is. And there's been a lot of research done on how organizations are having more success when they're really having town halls, talking to their teams, understanding their position on a range of issues. Understanding and acknowledging doesn't necessarily mean you agree, but being open-minded about it is the key to really building the relationship and building those authentic connections. So we've got to open our minds and understand that even though we don't necessarily see it the way that our workforce sees it, we have to demonstrate that we're open to it. And that's what I think is so important today.
What does that look like, Ben? Is that the leadership team telling their own stories, their own purpose-driven stories, and how that relates back? What does that look like from a practical sense?
Well, I think it's, it's the old story of asking more and telling less, finding out what their concerns are, their priorities, their issues first, before actually bringing in your own examples and stories. So, people respond more positively when they have a chance to be heard and when they have their own voice. So I think great, really in tune leaders are allowing for that to happen, and they take a step back and they listen and they focus, and then they'll share their wisdom and their experiences too.
You mentioned the 3-step requirements for leaders before we hit record, which was really interesting. I want to bring us back to that.
Those 3 things are very simple and the basis of my keynote that goes with the book. Ready, responsive, and relevant. So those are the keys to being a great real-time leader, is you need to be ready. You need to understand that you've got to adjust on the fly at a moment's notice and also respond rather than react. And the difference is taking purposeful, positive action. So that when I say purposeful, it's not action that's driven by your emotions. You have that awareness and you respond to new realities. And then finally, relevant is, I need to be the type of person that, as a leader and my company, understands that what we are showcasing has value. It has meaning to people. And relevance to me, if something isn't relevant, then I'm not going to be interested. I'm going to turn off.
I've been part of organizations where we've had that communication from the leadership team, and it's so disconnected from the reality of what really is taking place throughout the workplace, or what is we're hearing from customers, or even pop culture. As a business, you kind of have to understand that too. The outside, outside, not just inside of the organization.
Exactly. So that's what relevance is about. Does this have meaning to me? Is this pertinent? Is this current?
Yeah, is it current? That's what I meant.
That's a really big thing.
Yeah, it's a good one. What about accountability? Because this is one that a lot of the leaders I speak to struggle with. How do we get people to become more accountable?
Chris, I wrote about that in this book, and I also wrote about it in my first book called Lead Yourself First, Indispensable Lessons in Business and in Life. And in this current book, Leading in Real Time, I think when leaders understand that they role model accountability, and that people have their, we as a society, a world, global community, we've got our eyes on our leaders all the time. And so, when they slip up and they don't own it, then it really diminishes their credibility in the eyes of many, many people. So modeling the accountability is what helps other people recognize that they're accountable too. And I don't think it's a dirty word. I think we can be positive role models to show that we understand that we've got to own our behavior, we've got to own our decisions, we've got to own our actions. And that's what accountability means. Who
holds us accountable? Do we allow and encourage our teams to hold us accountable as well? How do we position that in a positive way?
Yeah, I think that's when leaders have humility and are able to say to their teams, like, I want to know how I'm doing. If I do something that doesn't sit well with you, then I want you to tell me, because then I grow as a leader as well. So I think that's one step that a leader can take, is owning their mistakes, being ready to get that feedback. And I know that that's something that isn't necessarily new, but right now, because the spotlight is on being in the now and taking the right course of action, that it's okay to admit if something doesn't work, and that's what makes you a better leader.
One of the big talking points, and I'm sure you've heard about it, is this great resignation that we're seeing ahead of us, or I think it's kind of happening right now. How do we keep our best people from leaving our organization? We're seeing post-pandemic, or as we start to come out, hordes of employees leaving organizations at a rate that we've not seen for a long while.
Well, I think there are a number of reasons for it. And one is that people have long memories. Whatever actions some companies took in the last 18 months either resonated or didn't resonate. And there'll always be that, percentage of high talent and exceptional talent that knows that they have choices regardless of the economy. So they're going to exercise that power of choice. And again, I think it's that culture that an organization sets that can positively or negatively impact that. Some leaders I actually was talking to only a few days ago when I just came back from a speaking engagement in the States were just saying, I know that maybe some of my best people, they're just not going to stick around for more than a couple of years. And that if that's a new reality, then I need to be okay with that. But again, I think when we focus on what we can control, then you can positively affect your attention. It's amazing how the demotivators are often the cause for people leaving, and those are usually intangible. The way a person is spoken to, the lack of feedback, not being included, all those factors make somebody think twice. Am I really valued here? And those are intangibles that you as a leader and an organization have 100% control over. So if you recognize that and you start to respond differently and reverse the way that you've been behaving and maintain your credibility while you do it, maybe behavior isn't the actions that you take, then you can positively influence a person's decision to stay or leave.
Mm-hmm. And I think,
because as we know, it's not always about the money.
You are right. When you look at the reasons, the research of why people leave, organizations, they're all things in our control, or vast majority are things that are fully in our control. What are some things that we can do to embrace change and manage uncertainty? Because that's been I think it's going to be a big focus and skill and muscle we need to develop.
We all have in our DNA resilience. When we're going through a difficult time with so much uncertainty, we need to remember that we've gone through this before in different forms, personally and professionally. I mean, I know that life is a roller coaster, and when we put it into perspective and understand that change is part of life, I think if we also exercise as much control as we can by anticipating change, that makes us feel more in control. So in other words, just knowing that, things are constantly flowing, things are constantly changing. And again, you have that power to respond to it. And if you see it that way, then I think we don't fight it as much. So think about what you've already achieved and overcome in great times of change in your life and in your business and in your career. And that will give you the resilience to continue to embrace change and anticipate it in the future. The other really big part of it is to understand that change is emotional. Great leaders, when they're able to take a step back and they understand the emotions that people are going through before they try to apply all the solutions and, implement those changes, that's when change often backfires, because we haven't tuned into the fact that people have their fears, they have their concerns, they have questions. And again, preventative maintenance. If you take those steps to have those conversations, realize how people are feeling, allay their fears, I think that makes a big difference in keeping your team and inspiring your team to move through the change together.
If you think about the book and obviously why you wrote this, what do you hope that leaders walk away with after reading your book?
My hope for leaders is for them to understand that when they maintain an open mind about their workforce and about their customers, and they're really tuned into themselves about what is happening in the moment, and they can maintain that focus, then they're going to be very successful. Because everything starts with us as leaders. Everything starts with our mindset. And we are in a unique time in the world that we have so much incredible technology. We have so many opportunities in front of us that we can continue to evolve. And I think that's very exciting.
Mm-hmm. I agree. First and foremost, the book came out today. So amazing. It's now available. So everyone can grab a copy. So where can people grab a copy of the book? And if they want to work with you or contact you directly to have a chat and learn more, where can they reach you?
Thank you. They can reach me at Michelle Ray, MICHELLERAY.com. And there's information, of course, about my book, about my services that I offer, whether they're on stage, online, or on demand. And I would be absolutely thrilled to speak to anyone who's listening to your podcast. And my book is available at pretty much every online retailer.
Anywhere books can be bought.
Exactly.
Amazing. Well, look, thanks for taking the time to join us. As always, for everyone listening, those links are already in the description below. So make sure you do that. Also, make sure that you connect over on LinkedIn as well.
That's right. Thank you so much. Of course. Yeah.
You got to grow the following as well.
You're right.
So
I would love that.
I'll leave that below as well. But if there's a parting piece of advice, what would that be? And then I'll let you go.
My parting piece of advice is to, leading yourself is, being yourself. And again, I think the key to success for every leader is to recognize what their strengths are and to be real and to put people first.